And I chose to do my therapy video on sequencing. So I will first explain a little bit about sequencing and why it is an important skill to target in therapy, and then I will demonstrate a couple examples of how you can incorporate sequencing in a variety of ways using several different activities in therapy. So sequencing means being able to organize and arrange information, language, and actions in the correct order. Sequencing is a foundational skill to many aspects of language, executive function, and other areas of academics. We use sequencing skills in all areas of life and don't even realize it. So we use these skills to follow multi-step directions, complete a math problem, break a big task into smaller tasks, to complete and form sentences with correct syntax, or to retell a story. So sequencing is a common area that children struggle with, especially the children that we are usually working with, if they don't develop a strong foundation when they're young. So it's easy for them to fall behind, and it can impact several areas of their life as well as their academic success as they move forward in their education. So I'll explain some of the materials that I like to use in therapy, or that I may have seen another clinician use in therapy that I thought were really good tools. And I'll demonstrate kind of how to carry out some of those activities with a child in a therapy session. So one of the first activities that I really like, and there are several different types of these activities that you can find, but it's what happens next picture sequencing. And I really like this activity because it's a good starting place. The task is fairly simplistic. The pictures do not have a ton of detail. So you might first only require that the child gives you the first and the last picture. And then you might build up to first, next, last, or first, next, then, depending on their ability and if it seems like they're sort of getting the idea of the task. And then another way that you can expand on this is after they have been able to place it in the correct order, which might first take a model of you doing it, then you can mix up the cards and say which one comes first and see what they do. And then after they seem to get that idea down and they're able to place it in order, then you can require more from them in terms of their expressive language skills. So, okay, it's your turn to tell me this story, and see if they can do it just on their own. They may also need a visual prompt or cue, such as a strip like this. Hopefully it would be a lot nicer than mine, but you can do something like this with either the words first, next, last, or just a number sequence, 1, 2, 3, or a combination of the two, depending on what you're teaching them and how that child learns best. And then another nice thing about these type of activities is that you can expand on the number of items. You might only start with 2, you might build to 3, but you could continue to add on to 4 or 5, depending on how they're doing with 3 items. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to use the picture sequencing cards in a therapy session with a child. So the nice thing about these cards is that they have different themes. So maybe you're talking about the months in the year, or you're talking about a life cycle. It just kind of depends on what you're working on. If you want to target the first, next, then, or the 1, 2, 3 sequence. So an example of just kind of modeling the story and the sequencing. So first, the pig got dirty. Next, he took a bath. Last, he was clean. And you can kind of model it using the first, second, and third. First, he got. Next, he took a bath. Last, he was clean. And you might model that a couple times or maybe just once, and then see if they might be able to tell you which one goes first. You're right. First, he got dirty. What happened next?
Then he took a bath.
What happened last?
He was clean.
You're right. First, he got dirty. Next, he took a bath. Last, he was clean. and you can kind of model that sequence again. And with this activity, there are usually just 3 pictures in the scene, but you can also find ones that have 4 or 5 and maybe more details, and maybe you're expecting more from the child verbally. Another activity that I like to use is a story sequence. This is a great opportunity to tie in sequencing activities into the curriculum or familiar stories like The Three Little Pigs, for example. And there are tons of resources online for stories. Some don't have words, some do. You could make up your own story to go with the picture items. But some activities like this are kind of fun because the kids get to cut out the pictures, place them in order. There's a story that goes with it with the highlighted words first, next, then last. It gives you an opportunity to talk about it. It's something that they can take home and retell again and kind of work on that skill over time. But I really like to use sequencing that also goes with a story. Or to do a story like The Three Little Pigs, for example, you might choose to use props or figurines to first tell the story, and then also have the sequencing strip or some type of storyline visual graphic organizer that you could use. And this is where you could work on the narrative aspect, and you can expand as needed and talk about the characters, the setting, and also the story sequence. So I'll show you this activity again from a better view, see what we're doing. So this activity might be for children that are a little bit older, and they might be able to read these passages by themselves, or maybe you'll be able to read it with them, but they can at least recognize the words first, next, then, and last. And these story sequencing activities still have a visual cue of the 1, 2, 3, 4 for them, and they also have the highlighted words first, next, then, and last. And the nice thing about these activities is that they can be tailored to the theme or the month, or also the curriculum that the students might be working with in their classroom. So for this activity, it's called Winter Clothes. So you might need to read it to the child first a few times so they can get familiar with the story, and then you can start to model it, and again, then requiring the child to do it themselves. So this one is called Winter Clothes. Jenny needed to find her winter clothes before she could go outside in the snow. First, pants. Next, she found her long winter coat. Then, she found her snow boots. Last, she found her stocking hat, scarf, and mittens. All these clothes would keep. So first, she found her snow pants. Next, she found her long winter coat. Then, she found her snow boots. Last, she found her stocking hat, scarf, and mittens. So you can model that a few times, kind of maybe mix up the pictures. What did she need to put on first?
First, she needed to find her snow pants.
What did she put on next?
Next, she needed a coat.
Then what did she put on?
Gotta put on your boots.
And last?
Last, her hat, mittens, and scarf.
Good job. And you might reread the story again, kind of pointing at the items in order. Your child may not obviously get the sequence right off the bat. You might have to model it again, or maybe cue them. Maybe they aren't reading yet, so you might have to reread that part for them. Next, she found her long winter coat. Where's her winter coat? But this is just one example of what you can do, and there are several different types of these activities that you can find online and lots of other resources for sequencing story activities. So the third activity that I'm going to talk about is one that would work for older age groups or maybe children who have already mastered the basic sequencing, and it's sort of moving toward completing narratives. So activities such as Telltale or Story Dice are great for this here with me, but I included Telltale in my handout. I included a picture as well because I think it's a really fun activity. I love it. It's super fun. children still have a visual cue or a prompt. So for the story cubes, they have pictures on them. I'll show you a little bit more in my demonstration, but it kind of gives them a prompt to go off of. And it's the same for Telltale. There are just pictures, but no words. So they still have that visual cue or prompt, but they have to come up with their own story in sequential order using the first, next, then last format, or the beginning, middle, end format, however you decide to format it, in a way that their peers and other listeners can still follow and understand their story. So depending on the age and the level of the students, it may also work for their peers to rate whether they understood the story. Were they able to include all of the details? Maybe they were missing something. There might have been a picture on one of the dice or on one of the picture cards, and they either didn't understand it or they didn't include all of the details within the picture. So it's kind of a fun way for them to all work together and decide how best to complete the story. Something nice about these activities too is that, again, they can be altered to become more complex if needed. So some of the pictures have more details and some of them don't, depending on the level of the students that you're working with. So again, I'll demonstrate this video from a different angle so you can see. So my last activity is the story cubes activity. This can be tailored to really any age group, but it would probably be best for older age groups that have mastered the sequencing activities and are starting to work towards narratives or coming up with their own stories. So you might first start by just picking out the pictures that the children so they might be saying, first, there was a man. He went up to a castle, but it was locked. So next, he had to get out his key and open it up. Once he did, he had to cross the bridge at the end. So they can kind of mix up the vocabulary of first, next, then, 1, 2, 3, kind of beginning, middle, and end, not necessarily needing to say first, next, then, but kind of being able to tell the story in a sequence, like first something happened, next something else happened, last something happened, to kind of complete the story. So you might start by modeling it, picking out the pictures, letting them pick out the pictures to tell the story, and then you can always play the game where you roll the dice, whichever pictures they get, see if they can make up a story with it. So maybe...
I read a book, and then I played with the lock, and then I asked my mom a question.
So they can kind of make up their own story. Maybe it doesn't always make sense. This might be a time when you tie in a feedback chart for the other students to fill out. Did that make sense? Do we need to add in more details? You might start introducing a who, what, when, where, why type of visual graphic organizer to kind of help them. Okay, let's add in some more details. What happened when he found out it was locked? How did you get to your mom to ask her a question? And they can kind of ask some follow-up questions and sort of work together to kind of create a complete narrative. Another great thing about this activity is that there are several other dice, so you can add in more as needed, take away some if it's too complex, but that way they might have more details and visual prompts to help them tell the story. So these are just a few ideas, but there are several other activities for sequencing, and there are other skills that you may have to target first in order to build the right foundation before targeting sequencing, depending on the kids that you're working with. But there are tons of resources to expand on these types of activities in different ways and to tie it into their curriculum if you can. But these are just a few ideas and examples that I had of activities that could be used in therapy, and I hope that you find that this video is helpful.